Greetings and salutations everyone, my name is MCCORMICK and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 14 waiver wire pickups for the 2024 fantasy football season. Now this is the most important waiver wire video of the entire season, not only because of the catastrophic injuries that took place to guys like Christian McCaffrey, Taysom Hill, and Trevor Lawrence yesterday, but also because there's a bye-apocalypse on hand. We will have 6 teams missing, all on bye: the Commanders, the Patriots, Colts, Texans, Broncos, and Ravens. Therefore, many of our rosters are in shambles. So I'll talk about the best available players at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, kicker, and defensive positions for those of you who have not yet prepared for the bye-apocalypse in order to give yourselves a chance to win and still get into the fantasy football playoffs and give yourselves a chance of capturing a 2024 fantasy football championship. If you're looking for my thoughts on a specific player as we transition throughout today's episode, there are timestamps down in the description of the video. If you guys are interested, be sure to travel down there. Also, while you're down there, if you haven't yet already, subscribe to the channel and of course click the bell notification button. Later tonight, I will be live streaming like I do every single day here on the channel. If you guys are interested, it'll be after the Broncos take on the Cleveland Browns later tonight. So if you're interested and have any questions, be sure to swing on by. Thank you very much. Speaking of tonight's game, at the end of today's video, I will be putting together a couple entries via Underdog. Again, for those of you who are interested in potentially tailing these picks, be sure to travel down to the description. Check out Underdog at this current moment in time. If you sign up using code Andrew and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, not only are you going to be able to claim the first-time deposit offer, but you're also going to get my rankings sent to you every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. These are by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, includes flex in order to help you guys set yourself up for success every single Sunday morning. So for those of you who are interested, check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility. If in fact you are not eligible based on your current location, or perhaps you've used my code or somebody else's code in the past, you can always check out the Patreon rankings available there with unlimited questions answered. Thank you very much for all the support. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the running back conversation, beginning with our number one, Isaac Guerendo of the San Francisco 49ers. Earlier today was confirmed not only is Christian McCaffrey headed to the injured reserve, but also is Jordan Mason. Both running backs sustaining an injury last night. Christian McCaffrey knee and Jordan Mason high ankle sprain, both on the injured reserve. Isaac Guerendo will be the running back to take over in the absence of these two. And Guerendo earlier this season has been highly efficient when given a volume of opportunity. Besides last night scoring a touchdown in garbage time, sure, but he was given opportunity in weeks 6 and 8 in games in which Jordan Mason left early with injuries. In those games, had 24 rushing attempts and was averaging 7.67 yards per carry on average. The fact of the matter is the San Francisco 49ers offense elevates their running backs. And in the case of Isaac Guerendo, who is going to be exposed to a huge volume of opportunity from weeks 1 through 13 thus far this season, in the 12 games in which the San Francisco 49ers have played, their running backs are averaging 21 rushing attempts per game and 3.33 targets per game, with 24 plus touches of opportunity going in his direction for the remainder of the season. Again, there's still going to be a couple opportunities for Patrick Taylor to get himself a couple touches here and there, but Isaac Guerendo is clear and away going to be the number one running back based on how they've utilized them over the course of the season thus far. On top of the fact that their upcoming schedule consists of the Chicago Bears, LA Rams, Miami Dolphins, Detroit Lions, he really does have a favorable schedule to where you are unloading the fab clip. And not only that, if you have the number one waiver priority, this is how you win your 2024 fantasy football championship. For those of you who listened to me over the course of the last month plus, when I told you do not keep Jordan Mason, keep Isaac Guerendo on roster, again, many of you guys didn't listen. He's only rostered in 2% of Yahoo leagues and 5% of sleeper leagues. Pick him up and help yourself potentially capture a 2024 fantasy football championship with him on roster. Moving on to our number two, we have Kenneth Gainwell. Now, many of you may think of Kenneth Gainwell as a potential handcuff pickup for Saquon Barkley, which he certainly can be for the remainder of the season. But going into week 14, considering the bye-apocalypse in the 6 teams missing and all the injuries that have occurred over the course of the last couple weeks, Kenneth Gainwell is not only a potential handcuff, he's a pick up and play for week 14, considering they take on the Carolina Panthers. One of the most advantageous matchups at the running back position we just most recently saw. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White found themselves a lot of success on the ground. And when we get into a situation this upcoming weekend where the Eagles have mounted a massive lead against the Carolina Panthers, and it forces, of course, them to pull Saquon Barkley out of the starting lineup, Kenneth Gainwell in the fourth quarter with the starting offensive line could find himself a lot of opportunity share in garbage time to find himself, being fantasy relevant in week 14 for those of us who are in need of a pickup and play this week. Now, another pickup and play in garbage time would be Jamaal Williams. Obviously, because of Taysom Hill's unfortunate season-ending injury that was confirmed earlier this morning, there is clearly a need for another running back within this offense outside of Alvin Kamara. So this upcoming week when they take on the New York Giants and possibly blow them out, especially considering the New York Giants' best defensive tackle, Dexter Lawrence, is out for the remainder of the season, again, the running game for the New Orleans Saints should be extremely potent. And once they mount a massive lead, someone like Jamaal Williams, only rostered in 1% of Yahoo leagues, could easily be picked up and played against this Giants defense and find himself a lot of success within garbage time. Then we move on to our number 4, Ray Davis. Very similar. You may see him as a potential, handcuff option to James Cook. But even in his own right, this most recent performance, 11 carries, 63 and a touchdown last night against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, he may just be purely a handcuff, but in the event in which they blow out the Rams this week, or at least take a sizable lead against that team, there's a possibility in which they could continue to give Ray Davis opportunities outside of the rotation touches that he gets. They may give him opportunities in which he's getting himself touches late in the game and finding himself being fantasy relevant within the overall circumstance. Then we move on to our number 5, KIMANI VIDAL. Now, this is a running back that purely in my mind is just a lottery ticket. If you are looking forward to weeks 15 through 17 and the potential of Gus Edwards potentially losing his job in the absence of J.K. Dobbins while he is on the injured reserve, KIMANI VIDAL could end up being a guy that could take over the job. Time will tell. Obviously, yesterday, Gus Edwards led the team in terms of total touches, total offensive snaps amongst all running backs, and even routes ran. So KIMANI VIDAL not even favored within any of those categories is definitely a bad sign. But going forward, if you're looking for a quote-unquote lottery ticket, remember, majority of lottery tickets do not hit. So in this case, you are only rostering him just in case, perhaps somehow, some way, he wins the job, and for the remainder of the season, he could be fantasy relevant if something was to happen to Gus Edwards. And then the final running back I wanted to mention before we move on to wide receivers is Sincere McCormick, the RB2 as of right now of the Las Vegas Raiders, in the event in which going into this week, Alexander Mattison and Zamir White are once again going to be absent. Again, he could certainly be of value taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Amir Abdullah is still clearing away the RB1 in terms of overall snap counts and touches, but going forward, Sincere McCormick continuing to play well within this offense. The coaching staff continues to talk about him within these press conferences that, of course, he is continuing to earn more and more touches. In the absence of Alexander Mattison and Zamir White this week, could certainly be of value, considering, again, many of us are dealing with the bipocalypse of 6 teams absent. Could certainly be someone that we might want to look into going into this week. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver conversation, beginning with our number 1, Adam Thielen. Look, all these wide receivers played incredibly well this week, but Adam Thielen has gotten back to being Bryce Young's number 1 option. When we look back at the 2023 statistics, Adam Thielen averaging over 10 targets per game with Bryce Young throughout that middle of the season span from weeks like 4 through 10. There was a great volume of opportunity going in his direction. And if in fact we're going to be in a position in which Adam Thielen continues to play as well as he has, coming off of a game of 10 targets, 8 catches, 99 and a touchdown, honestly should have had himself a second touchdown in that game, but was called incomplete. There's a potential which he could have came away with 25 points this most recent week. Currently rostered in 31% of leagues. Taking on the Philadelphia Eagles this week is not an exciting matchup, definitely a difficult one. But considering how well the Panthers offense has played as of late, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs and of course the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you would hope that in a negative game script, Adam Thielen will certainly be of value for fantasy purposes. Our number 2, we have Nick Westbrook-IKHINE of the Tennessee Titans, currently rostered in 17% of Yahoo leagues. The fact of the matter is, no matter what I say, it's just purely a matter of him scoring touchdowns. He has scored a touchdown in 7 of the last 8 games. He has scored 8 total touchdowns in the last 8 games. The expectation is that this upcoming week, he'll probably score a touchdown. He'll probably score over 10 fantasy points and probably should be starting for one of you. And then we move on to our number 3. Very similar to Nick Westbrook-IKHINE, we have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who in this overall position is very similar because he has scored a touchdown in each of the last 3 games he has played, 1 minimum, but has scored a total of 4 in the last 3 games as a member of the New Orleans Saints. Considering Taysom Hill's absence, obviously with a season-ending injury, that grants even more opportunity for other receiving options within this offense. But Marquez Valdes-Scantling is only going to get himself 3 to 4 targets, maybe catch the ball 1 to 2 times. If he finds himself in the end zone, fantastic. If the streak continues, it would not surprise us considering they're taking on the New York Giants this week. Then we move on to Parker Washington, who's coming off a week in which he had 12 targets, 6 catches, 103 and a touchdown, had himself an incredible overall performance. And if we're going to be in a situation in which the game plan continues to revolve around him, because whether it was Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones, both quarterbacks continue to funnel target the ball in his direction. So if we're going to continue on with Parker Washington being the primary member of this game plan, besides guys like, of course, Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas Jr., expect that with Trevor Lawrence out this upcoming week, Mac Jones at quarterback, I mean, he targeted Parker Washington 9 times in like 2.5 quarters. We're going to expect to see a lot of opportunity going into Parker Washington's direction over the course of this upcoming weekend's matchup against the Tennessee Titans. All right, moving on to our number 5, we have Elijah Moore. Look, Elijah Moore could be picked up prior to tonight's game. If in the event you are looking for a wide receiver for next week, again, he's only rostered in 10% of Yahoo formats, with Cedric Tillman dealing with the concussion protocol, and of course, Elijah Moore getting himself more and more opportunity every week, there's a possibility in which you could pick him up today and not have to fight for him on the waiver wires going into week 14. He's a great option based on his overall opportunity share, considering this offense is throwing the ball 40 plus times per game in normal weather situations with Jameis Winston as the starting quarterback. Then we move on to VELE. So earlier today, we did get a confirmation that Josh Reynolds is not going to be activated, which is very promising for VELE, who's coming off of the last 3 performances of 11.9, 8.6, and 11.0 fantasy points. The last 3 weeks and a half PPR averaging 10.5 fantasy points per game. Later tonight, I will have an entry with VELE implicated within it because I truly do believe he is valuable enough to consider as an option within our underdog entry. But I think, again, if you want to pick him up before tonight's game and utilize him next week, it's probably not going to be a great picture, unfortunately, because VELE has a week 14 bye. But if you are potentially looking to roster him and have him for the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 through 17, that could be a name. But for those of you who are looking for other wide receivers to potentially start going into this weekend, we have Ray McCloud, DeMarcus Robinson, and Michael Wilson. Look, Ray McCloud's coming off of his best week of the season. 4 catches, 95 yards, 11.3 fantasy points. They take on the Minnesota Vikings this week. They'll have to throw for the entirety of the game, and hopefully Kirk Cousins is not going to throw 4 interceptions like he has most recently. Then we have DeMarcus Robinson coming off of back-to-back games of a receiving touchdown. If this DeMarcus Robinson streak is back, expect him to be scoring 10-plus points per game every single week henceforth. And we have Michael Wilson indoors this week against the Seattle Seahawks in a controlled environment in terms of weather. They are a far better football team. And at home, taking on the Seahawks, again, this is a matchup that will determine potentially the winner of the NFC West. We're going to have to wait and see. But Michael Wilson getting himself more and more targets every week. As long as his offense continues to air it out, he'll definitely be implicated as a strong option for this week. All right, let's move on to the tight end conversation with our number 1, Tommy Tremble. Now, I do want to preface, this is under the assumption that Ja'Tavion Sanders does not end up returning this week. Obviously, he was dealing with an injury with his neck last week. In the absence of Ja'Tavion Sanders, Tommy Tremble, 8 targets, 5 catches, 77 yards. Whoever the starting tight end is of this football team is going to be of value. Tommy Tremble played 100% of the offensive snaps on Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this upcoming week has an opportunity of taking on the Philadelphia Eagles, who we most recently saw week 13. Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews combined for 15 targets, 11 catches, 105, and 2 touchdowns for 28.2 fantasy points. Tommy Tremble could certainly be of value in the absence of Ja'Tavion Sanders once again. Then we move on to Noah Gray, who, again, even though he didn't score a touchdown, 6 targets, 4 catches, 58 receiving yards, 7.8 fantasy points. If he scores a touchdown this most recent week, which, again, there was only 1 Chiefs scoring touchdown this most recent game against the Las Vegas Raiders, but if you end up with the touchdown on top of that overall performance, I mean, we're not complaining. He's a top 5 tight end by the end of the week. Currently only rostered in 11% of Yahoo leagues, 18% of sleeper leagues, taking on the Los Angeles Chargers this upcoming week. I mean, again, earlier this season in the game in which Noah Gray and, of course, Travis Kelce took on the Los Angeles Chargers, they targeted their tight ends nearly 15 times in that game. So if we're going to be in a situation in which the target opportunity is going to continue to be sent in his direction, yes, he is a touchdown-dependent tight end, but so are all the rest of these options that I'm about to mention. Moving on to our number 3, we have Juwan Johnson. Like we've mentioned earlier, Taysom Hill has sustained a season-ending knee injury. Now, since Derek Carr's return in the last 4 games, Derek Carr has been averaging 11 targets in the direction of his tight end. So if we're going to be in a situation in which Juwan Johnson is going to be mainly benefiting from that, of course, expect him to be a solid option. Currently only rostered in 3% of Yahoo leagues, 6% of sleeper leagues. Going into this upcoming weekend's matchup against the Giants, it is technically the most difficult matchup at the tight end position. But considering how much this team favors throwing the ball to their tight ends, expect Juwan Johnson to be highly implicated and utilized within the offensive scheme. Moving on to our number 4, we have Tyler Conklin. He has one of the best matchups you could possibly ask for, taking on the Dolphins. They are a top 8 matchup at the tight end position. They've most recently allowed 6 catches, 78 to Green Bay Packers tight ends, 9 for 103 in a touchdown to New England Patriots, and 14 for 131 in a touchdown to Las Vegas Raiders tight ends. Expect a lot of potential upside for Tyler Conklin, who's coming off of a week in which he got himself healthy usage. 4 receptions, 32 yards, 5 targets, played 82% of the snaps. Not a bad week to potentially pick up and play him if you're desperate. Then we move on to Mike Gesicki. Now, the only concern I have with Mike Gesicki, besides the fact that he has himself a fantastic matchup against the Cowboys. Cowboys most recently allowed 5 catches, 54 to New York Giants tight ends, 7 for 51 in a touchdown to Washington Commanders tight ends, and 7 catches for 48 to Texans tight ends. Besides the fact that he's got a great matchup, unfortunately, Mike Gesicki has a lot of target competition within this offense. Besides T. Higgins, Jamar Chase Brown, you also have guys like Tanner Hudson who are getting themselves consistent target opportunity within this offense, which in given weeks forces Mike Gesicki to disappear. So in the event in which he doesn't disappear this week and is given healthy opportunity share, great, he's a fantastic play. Otherwise, very sketchy within the upcoming contest. Then we close out the tight end conversation with Dawson Knox. In the event in which Dalton Schultz once again misses another week, again, they're taking on the Rams, which is an advantageous matchup most recently. New Orleans tight ends, 12 catches for 79. New England tight ends, 10 catches for 98. The tight end position has been a premier threat against the Los Angeles Rams as of late, so Dawson Knox can certainly fill in that void going into this week in the absence of Dalton Kincaid. Let's move on to the quarterback conversation. We begin with Russell Wilson. In the event in which someone like Caleb Williams has already been rostered in your league, Russell Wilson's the next man up, currently rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues, 41% of sleeper leagues. Coming off of a week in which he had 414 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, completed a pass to 10 different receivers, now has the opportunity of taking on the Browns, who just a couple weeks back in week 12 went for 270 passing yards and a touchdown in a snow game. So if we're going to be in a situation in which it's going to be a controlled weather environment, the Browns have allowed 2 passing touchdowns to 5 of the last 6 quarterbacks they have played against, not including tonight's game against Bo Nix. That will be, to be determined. But Russell Wilson's the best pickup and play of the week at quarterback. Then we move on to Aaron Rodgers, who has been able to complete 2 passing touchdowns in 4 of the last 5 games. Again, he's continuing to score fantasy points, but the Jets obviously are not a winning team. So going forward against the Dolphins, expect a negative game script, and in that overall event for him to complete his 2 touchdowns, get his 200 plus passing yards, and still be relevant within that category. Speaking of 2 passing touchdowns, very similar to Aaron Rodgers, as of late, Will Levis has been great. Since coming back from his injury, 3 of his last 4 games, 2 plus touchdowns scored. Taking on the Jaguars, which is a top 5 potential matchup, in the absence of Trevor Lawrence, should be a positive game script for Will Levis, which hopefully doesn't mean a lot of running for Tony Pollard that is going to potentially siphon away his value. But in the event in which you are missing a quarterback, Will Levis a solid pickup and play this week. Then we have our number 4, Derek Carr, taking on the New York Giants. Look, in the absence of Taysom Hill, that provides even more potential red zone and touchdown opportunity for Derek Carr this week. Again, the Giants matchup is a cakewalk. If we're going to be in a situation in which Alvin Kamara scores every single touchdown, so be it. But I would expect Derek Carr to get at least 1 to 2 touchdowns within this game, considering this is probably going to be a blowout in their favor. Then we have Jameis Winston. So again, if you need a quarterback for next week, you can pick him up before tonight's game and utilize him. Again, they take on the Pittsburgh Steelers next week. Last time out against the Pittsburgh Steelers, had himself a solid game, even though it was a snow, impacting game. There's a situation in which Jameis Winston and the Cleveland Browns could take on the Pittsburgh Steelers once again and have the upper hand within the matchup. So if you are interested, pick him up and play him this upcoming week. Then we have Cooper Rush, the final option I wanted to mention. Cooper Rush takes on the Bengals. Again, that Bengals defense cannot stop a soul. They've allowed 2 passing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks in 4 of the last 5 games. And of course, they're a top 10 matchup in terms of passing statistics isolated. Therefore, Cooper Rush, a solid option against the Bengals. All right, let's move on to the final section of today's video. In regards to kickers and defenses, we begin with players like, first and foremost, Parker Romo. For some reason, every single either Yahoo and or Sleeper have changed John Parker Romo to Parker Romo. I guess that's what he is known by going forward. Again, currently only rostered in 12% of Yahoo leagues, 9% of Sleeper leagues. I can't believe that his rostership percentage is this low. He has scored 13 plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. Please pick him up. He has scored 3 field goals in those 3 games in which he is scoring double-digit fantasy points. Then we move on to Matthew Wright. In the event in which Strader is going to miss another consecutive game, Matthew Wright is coming off a performance of 14 fantasy points. Strader the week prior, 13 fantasy points. The Chiefs cannot score offensively. They are settling for field goals, and in that event, Matthew Wright certainly of value. Then we close out the kicker conversation with Brandon McManus taking on the Lions on Thursday Night Football. McManus has scored 10 plus fantasy points in each of the last 2 games, taking on the Lions indoors, a controlled environment. We don't have to worry about the weather impacting his overall game. Then we move on to the defensive conversation. The Arizona Cardinals. Look, the Cardinals have incredible upcoming matchups with the Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots, and Carolina Panthers up ahead of them. The Cardinals defense, as of the last 4 games, have scored 12, 12, 11, and 7 fantasy points. So considering how well they have played as of late and the fact that they take on the Seattle Seahawks this week, the Seattle Seahawks, when we talk about defenses against them over the course of the last 4 games, defenses are averaging 12.25 fantasy points per game. The Arizona Cardinals most recently putting up 11 points against them. The expectation is that the Arizona Cardinals are not only a great pickup and play for this week, but for the remainder of the fantasy football season. Then we have the New Orleans Saints, who in my opinion, this is only a 1-week pickup and play, only because they are taking on the Giants. The last 8 defenses that have taken on the Giants in fantasy football have averaged 11.13 fantasy points per game, a solid pickup and play. And then we close out with the Seattle Seahawks, who, as of late, they just most recently scored 20 fantasy points as a defense against the Arizona Cardinals. They had themselves a pretty solid week against the New York Jets as well. The expectation is that, of course, the Seattle Seahawks could put together another solid defensive performance. And I also wanted to quickly mention another defense that could potentially be picked up that is rostered in a very low percentage of leagues. The Tennessee Titans taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. With Mac Jones at quarterback, the Titans defense could be a solid pickup and play. Currently only rostered in 5% of leagues. Okay, with this all covered, that covers our Week 14 waiver wire pickups for the week. Again, we're going to close out today's episode by putting together a couple entries via Underdog. For those of you interested, let's go ahead and check that out right now. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about my favorite plays going into tonight's game between the Cleveland Browns and, of course, the Denver Broncos. So as of right now, my favorite play of the week belongs with Courtland Sutton going higher than 4.5 receptions. Now, he has been able to go over 6 receptions and 70 plus receiving yards in each of the last 5 games he has participated in. So if you guys want to push this to a higher number, potentially 5.5, or even take a receiving yard number in which you are, potentially going after 59.5 for a higher percentage, all for it, go for it. But as of right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line him up with 4.5, going higher on that reception count. Again, he's been able to accomplish that in 5 of the last 5 games. Now, I want to continue with potential receiving options of the Denver Broncos, because I do believe the Denver Broncos will come away with a victory tonight. Specifically, I'm looking for VELE. If I can find him on this list, that'd be great. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and type him in here. Let's look up VELE. There he is, VELE. So, as of late, again, he's been highly productive in games this season in which he has played 60% of the snaps or more. Again, he's done that 4 times. Now, earlier today, they did confirm that Josh Reynolds has not been activated and not returning, so VELE has himself still a big role within this offense. He has been able to go over 4 receptions and 39 receiving yards in 4 of the last 4 games. Therefore, the idea of potentially taking him at 2.5 receptions is an automatic in my mind. That's why I'm probably just going to take it there. I probably put together an entry in which I have him at 3.5 receptions and probably Courtland at 5.5. But for right now, if I'm just going for automatics, this is what I'm putting together. Now, considering every slip that you enter via Underdog has to include players from 2 different teams, I'm going to go ahead and enter. Let's go find Jerry Jeudy going higher on his 3.5 receptions. Again, Jerry Jeudy, a revenge game against his former team, the Denver Broncos. He has been able to go higher than 4+ receptions in 4 of the last 4 games. He will have the Patrick Surtain matchup, but I expect, considering he is the favorite receiving option of Jameis Winston as of late, to be prioritized and get himself a lot of opportunity. This is the entry that I'm going to make in regards to tonight. I also have another entry that I want to go ahead and put in, but these are the safe ones that I'd like to go with. Now, in regards to the other entry, I want to go higher on 1.5 receptions for Javonte Williams. He has gone higher on this number in 11 of the last 11 games. That in itself gives me a lot of confidence with his overall potential. Then I additionally want to go ahead and take lower interceptions. I want to go lower on Bo Nix. Thus far this season, over the course of the last 10 games that he has played, he has only thrown 2 interceptions in the last 10 games. Over the course of this entire season, the Cleveland Browns have only had 2 defensive interceptions. Therefore, Bo Nix, I would expect to take care of the football and, of course, keep it protected and not turn it over. And then considering we need a player for the other team, I'm looking in the direction of David Njoku, going higher than his 3.5 receptions, taking on the matchup. Again, he's got himself a healthy share of opportunity as of late. There are other tight ends that certainly get themselves targets within the given offense, but in this current circumstance, this is the one that I'm most confident with going into tonight's game. Again, you could potentially tail these picks, put together your own entries, whether it's the NBA, the NHL, the NFL. Take advantage of it today using code Andrew via Underdog. There's a link down in the description for those of you interested in getting my rankings and, of course, tailing these picks. But that's going to cover it. I'll be back tomorrow talking about my top 36 running back rankings, and back later tonight after tonight's game answering any and all fantasy football questions. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.